it's a super important process that every founder should do, is really trying to establish what those behaviors are, what are those cultural values that they're looking to. And normally it's stuff that they embody themselves. Just hard to get up out of bed.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's almost, I mean, I would say a lot of the symptoms are the same as depression.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, just very hard to get up and get out of bed. Having some variation in your life is critical, and you can't, like, even at times where it's very intense, you need to find some time for yourself. And my dad always used to say to me, is if you're physically healthy, you're going to mentally be happy. The business isn't everything.
No.
Right? And it can feel like everything at many points in time, but it isn't. And there's so many other things in life which will make you happy. And
so this is Vulnerable, the first founder mental health podcast powered by Founders Taboo. Let's get into it. Alex, welcome to the podcast. I don't do any introduction, by the way. This just goes straight in. I don't know if you've listened to any episodes.
I have.
Wow.
I've listened to one.
Which one?
To Nick's.
Nick's, yeah. Because you know Nick really well.
Because I know him well.
Yeah. That's fine. What do you think?
I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I obviously know him very well.
Of course.
And we've been investing together for a long time, and he's almost a co-founder on my new venture. So I can't, he's on the board. Let me put it that way. But he's, I know him very well, but I still learned some things.
This is the sports invest. He
Sequel.
actually, so we went for a beer. I'm not going to be seeing him next week. We were meant to talk about what's happened to me. He doesn't know I've stood down yet. But I'm seeing him next week, and when I went for a beer with him after the podcast, he alluded to this very interesting new venture that he was embarking on.
Yeah.
With a group of amazing founders. I had no idea you were involved.
Yeah, no, I'm co-founder and CEO. So
How do you do it, man? Like you've got Velocity Black, everything else.
Yeah.
And now
I just love it.
Really?
I just love it.
Really?
Yeah. Look, I've always loved business, and in a way that many people would say is kind of weird.
Yes.
and I don't know where it comes from. Probably from my parents and being around sort of business from a young age. But
interesting.
I just I love helping founders with their companies. Obviously, investing, advising. Obviously starting and operating my own businesses, and particularly enjoy, the early years when you're really innovating and solving big problems and getting product market fit. But yeah, I mean, we can talk more about sort of the journey, but definitely, I'm excited to start something new. I'm still involved with Velocity Black. I stepped back to be non-exec chairman at the start of this year.
Makes sense.
In order to start.
So your hands off with that.
I'm still putting in quite a few hours at the moment. There's a lot going on, but it's all good stuff. The company's doing really well. We raised about $30 million. Well, actually, no, $40 million total over the years, and the company has always been growing very rapidly in terms of revenue. And about 3 years ago now, we reached a point where we were generating cash, and we've been generating cash for 3 years now, while still growing pretty rapidly. So it's in a different phase. Whilst it's very, I think it's exciting for a lot of people, the phase it's currently in. There's lots of opportunities for us. I really enjoy this sort of early stages, and so I. What
do you enjoy about it?
Well, I enjoy the challenges. I enjoy really speaking to customers and solving their problems and trying to understand their mindset. I enjoy building a team. I enjoy building the team from day one. And I think, at Velocity Black now we're about 125 employees. And, it was great to build that team. And there's a lot of lessons we learned on that journey, which I can share more about. But I think that phase of building a team from nothing, putting the company in a place where we're able to attract the best talent in the world, being able to onboard those team members, motivate them, I think, and then watching as they take on responsibility and you're gradually able to hand things over to specialists in different areas. I think that's a really fascinating part of the company's journey. So that's what I really enjoy. And look, the challenge of building something from nothing
Yes.
and then getting to the point where you have your first paying customers, right? That's a really awesome feeling. And I still remember the first time we had a couple of different products at Velocity. We actually pivoted 2-3 years into the journey. But I still remember after the pivot, which was when we launched Velocity Black, the digital concierge product, and we charge sort of an annual membership fee for that product. I still remember the feeling when the first customer paid for it, right? And that was now many years ago. But I still remember exactly where I was.
Where were you?
I was in an office in Soho.
Really?
And I was with one of my team members, and we sort of hacked together this pretty terrible checkout flow, actually, considering the price point of the product, which is several £1,000s. But I still remember the feeling when we charged that first customer, and he was really excited to come on board, right, as a paying customer. And I still remember that. And so I think getting to that point with a product where you build something from nothing and you have someone who really sees value in it and is willing to pay, in some cases, significant sums of money to use your product, that's a pretty magical part of the journey. So,
were you actually excited by the prospect, or were you incredibly daunted that somebody's given you several £1,000s of their money and actually need to now go and fucking deliver?
Look, you know, in terms of my personality, I'm more sort of bullish and confident, right?
Yes.
I'm like, well, look, you know, we did think carefully about the product, and
Really?
We'd built it. Me and my co-founders had really built it, you know, targeting ourselves. Right. And, you know, we'd both previously been working in finance, had done quite well in our previous careers. We're traveling all the time around the world, always trying to find awesome places to go, great things to do. So we knew that we would pay for the product, right?
Really?
At least in our previous careers, we would have. So we knew it was, we knew we were onto something. So I was confident we were going to be able to deliver. Little did I know about all the challenges we'd have around scaling that service to tens of thousands of customers, right? But,
before we get onto that, you actually never answered my question, which was the first question. How do you do it? How do you manage so many different things?
Set up processes.
Right.
Have a pretty I have pretty defined sort of windows in my calendar, right? Like, and so I will pretty much work out every morning, first thing in the morning. That gives me energy and certainly keeps me mentally balanced and healthy. And then I have different windows during the day where I do different tasks. I don't socialize that much. A lot of people think I do. I do go to a few startup events, but I really don't socialize that much. I have a very small group of friends.
Are you introverted?
I would say naturally I am.
Yes,
I have
me
to
too.
make a concerted effort to be extroverted, and a lot of people say, oh, I can't believe you're an introvert, and it's like, well, yeah, I come away from this absolutely drained of energy, right? So yeah, I don't know, I don't do much socializing. I'm a very small group of very close friends, so you know, I might socialize once or twice a week, right?
That's good going, Bob.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
That is good going.
That includes sort of breakfast or lunch, right? So, and then, you know, Saturdays and Sundays I'm working, right?
Really?
So, you know, I've got a wife, recently married, and
Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't know, that's not the right way to phrase it, is it? I've got a wife. I'm recently married to my beautiful wife, Miriam. And
how long have you been together?
7 years.
Very nice. How did you meet?
Very good question. It was actually through work.
Was it?
She worked for me. So
At Velocity?
She did, yeah. We didn't have a relationship where she was working for me, and I actually made her redundant.
Fucking hell.
Because we acquired a company in the US and we sort of merged the marketing functions, and we had a marketing team over in the US. So I made her redundant, which she was very upset about, and she's gone on to have a very successful career, by the way. But we started sort of dating about a month after that. So
wow.
Yeah.
How was that first interaction? Hey, I've let you go, but should we go on a date?
It was the other way around. I don't think she'll mind me saying.
Hey, should we go on a date? But you've let me go.
No.
Oh,
she said, can we meet up for some career advice? So okay. Yeah.
Nice.
The rest is history.
I like it. I really like it.
So yeah, look. What was the question again? So allocating time. Yeah. So like,
just before we go back onto that, I mean, the wife conundrum, a relationship conundrum, is fascinating because, as you know, before we started this podcast, I was talking about the burden that my fiance's taken financially and more emotionally from my experience as a founder. How does building your companies affect your relationship with Miriam?
Yeah, she's definitely a hero, and for putting up with cancelled holidays over the years. Me, in fact, leaving holidays after one day to go back to work, to cancelled social engagements, cancelled Christmases, many sacrifices that she's made or we've made over the years, and and I think there are. I put it this way: there are times during a company's journey which are very intense, and they should be, right? And if you're not putting in the time during those critical periods in your company's sort of life cycle, you can't expect your team to. So, I think you need to have a really good understanding and communicate clearly with your partner to have clear expectations on both sides about, hey, look, we're about to go through a really intense time. We need to raise some money, or we're struggling to find product market fit, and I'm going to be doing much longer hours. It's going to be hard for me to do that holiday this summer. I need to be there for the team. And I think if you communicate that, which is something I definitely struggled with a few years ago, I don't think you should have issues, right?
Interesting. I spoke to a female founder the other week, who shall remain nameless, who said her partner's really struggling with understanding what she's needing to sacrifice.
Yeah. Look, I think it could be I think Miriam understands because she has worked with me in a company, and she understands startups, right? So I think if you don't have any concept of what it's like to work in a startup, it can be quite challenging. And equally, maybe if your partner isn't as career focused, right? They have other things which are bigger priorities in their life, they also might find it hard to cope with. But so I don't have much advice for those people, unfortunately, because I haven't experienced that.
I wasn't expecting this to be turned into a relationship advice episode, but I'm just interested because we go back to your kind of processes and your busy workload and the insane amount of things that you must get through a week, which is daunting for you, although you absolutely fucking love it. But equally, Miriam, who's like, fucking hell, Alex, can we just have Sunday off?
Yeah. And we did have Sunday off last week. Well, at least we went for lunch. So yeah, look, I think she has, she's a very hard worker as well. Yeah. So again, that kind of helps. But yeah, look, she's definitely, there have been times when she has been frustrated.
Of course.
So, and I very much appreciate her sticking through those times and helping and supporting me through those times. And now we're in a very strong place, and I think we both understand, there are going to be intense periods in both our careers, and we kind of have to accept that sometimes we're going to see less of each other, or sometimes work has to be the number one priority for a period of time. I think we have a good understanding on that now.
Nice. Hey, can I ask a massive favour? Can you subscribe to this podcast right now, if you haven't already? Your subscribes, your sharing, your liking, your commenting all over social media is increasing our reach, and it's meaning that founders out there know it's okay to talk about their mental health. Thank you.
Vulnerable, a Founders to Be podcast, has been created to raise awareness on the highs, lows, and taboos of the founder journey, to amplify the raw and unfiltered stories of founders, and to remind those listening that they are not alone. Founders Taboo is a movement dedicated to improving access to support for founders' mental health and well-being in order to build a healthier startup ecosystem as a whole. Entrepreneurship is undeniably hard, but it doesn't have to cause hardship. We know that entrepreneurship is often lonely, but it doesn't have to be. Our support includes a safe space to take off the mask and interact with fellow founders in a free online community. You can access hundreds of psychologically informed resources and exercises to build up your mental health literacy. You can source and connect with startup and well-being professionals. You can participate in live support sessions, attend retreats, and much more. We want to promote mindfulness and entrepreneurship, harmony rather than conflict between health and building a business. And this all starts with speaking out and breaking some taboos. Join the movement. All founders are welcome. Follow us on LinkedIn to keep up to date and get involved.
We talked about the first user you got, and actually that was the start of the journey with Velocity Black. But actually, when you go deeper,
that was the start of the product.
Sorry,
that's
product.
In terms of the actual company, Velocity, we started it, almost 9 years ago now. And our first product was very different. It was actually pay at table in restaurants, so you could view the bill on your phone. We're like the first real company in the UK to do that. We integrated with all the point of sale systems, so you could view the bill on your phone, pay. You could book restaurants and stuff through the product as well. It was quite a popular product, but
why did you pivot?
Because it's just a terrible business, awful business, shitty unit economics, really high cost of acquisition. Well, the cost of acquisition of users was relatively high, and you had high churn because you're reliant on restaurants to educate the customer on how to use the product. And restaurants have high staff turnover, particularly in the UK. Of course, it's very hard for them to understand how, for their staff to understand how it works. And you have, that one time if you with your group of friends out at dinner and you're saying, hey, I want to pay on Velocity, and the waiter looks at you like you're a lunatic, you're never going to do it again, right? No. So look, it was a popular product because everyone can identify with the frustration of having to wait for the bill.
Yes.
Right? It's like, oh, fuck, yeah, I hate waiting for the bill in restaurants. Just want to be able to get up and go. But I think we were a bit early. There are a number of companies that have come in that second wave, Sunday and a few others recently with through COVID. COVID was really a driver of adoption of that kind of technology. But I still question in the long run whether the unit economics will work. I think it will take a very big institution like Apple or someone to really make that product work. But yeah, we raised a bunch of money for that product. In fact, most of the money we raised was for that product. And then we made a realization.
40 million total.
Yeah.
Let's say 25 mil.
More, yeah.
More, fuck me. Was on that product. Can you talk to me about the psychology of a pivot? Because this is something which is is incredibly daunting for founders, but equally one of the most amazing uses of time and money for a company.
Yeah, look, it's I still remember after we closed our Series B, which was it was like the week after Brexit, and we had the most money we'd ever had in the company's bank account. But me and Zia were we're stressed. We're more stressed, I think, than we'd ever been, because we realized that the current product just wasn't going to create the level of business that we wanted to create. We knew it was unsustainable.
Did you know that before you raised the Series B?
No.
Right.
No. We're still experimenting, right? We had a lot of demand. We had lots of customers. We had, it was growing very rapidly. It's just the losses were growing as well. And really, in the long term, we'd have been competing with OpenTable on that path, right? And so, we knew we had to try a few different things. Velocity Black was one of them. But yeah, it took a lot of courage to make that decision and communicate it to shareholders, to the team. We had to make a lot of changes.
Do you remember the moment you made the decision?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Yeah. It was.
Where were you?
That same place, actually, where we took the first payment for Velocity Black in the office. We were actually there was a glass sort of room within our office, and we were just writing down all these things all over the walls. And we actually made two bets. Velocity Black was one of them. Another one was a more SaaS approach to our first product. And it was very clear once we started going with Velocity Black that there was a huge amount of demand for it. And thankfully, revenue grew very rapidly. And, some of our shareholders who probably had doubts about the pivot or who were upset about it were sort of quickly brought on board when they saw the results. But yeah, look, it was a courageous decision. Another decision we could have taken would have been to shut down and give all shareholders their money back.
Of course.
Right. But yeah, we think we did the right thing in the interest of all shareholders, and I think today certainly they'd all be very happy that we went down that path.
How did you deal with the element of tech debt or potential tech debt with the existing product?
I mean, we completely we changed it. We invested in creating a new product, right? We got the team on board with the plan, and it's almost liberating, kind of, because we almost started at first we built it within our existing product, and then we kind of built a completely separate new app. I think it was liberating for them to be able to start from scratch. And at that point in time, when we started out, we acquired 3 different companies, right? Within 3 months in 3 different countries, right? Within our first year of starting the business. So we had sort of
Velocity
emerged,
Black, not Velocity.
No, Velocity. When we first started Velocity, we bought another company doing the same thing in terms of bill payments in the US, one in Canada, and we bought a reservation app in the UK called Uncover.
Yeah.
And we merged all those companies in 3 months and the various pieces of technology. So we did have a lot of tech debt, but it was good to be able to rationalize that. And actually that's one of the positive things from the pivot, is being able to say, actually, look, this is really working now, Velocity Black. Let's sunset some of this old technology and be able to focus on this new tech that we're building.
Being vulnerable here, what were the biggest fuck ups along the way?
Oh, we didn't make any mistakes.
Get out.
No, look, I think we would say for the first few years, me and Zia believed that we had a very strong culture as a company, but it wasn't written down anywhere, and that creates a lot of problems, right? Because if you think, oh, this is, these are the behaviors that we have as a business and individuals in our company have. But, if you haven't written them down, it's unlikely that everyone in the company understands that, particularly as you scale the team, right, beyond like a handful of people. And so I think the biggest mistake we made was not investing enough in culture initially. Right, in the first few years, we didn't write down those cultural values, which leads to problems when you're trying to hire people, which leads to problems in terms of retaining people. So, one of the big changes we made at one point was actually investing time and actually, writing down, here are the behaviors we're looking for in individuals who want to join the company. We integrated that into a very, rigorous hiring process. And
what behaviors were you looking for? Do you remember?
Of course. Yeah. We wanted people who are adaptable. Only constant is change in today's world. And that was, embodied in the pivot that we had to make, right, as a business. And if we hadn't made that pivot, I can assure you the company would not be here today.
No.
So, we wanted people who could adapt to new situations, who were able to, even if they've been working on something for a year, be able to completely adapt to a new situation, work on a new product. We wanted people who had courage, because in order to progress quickly and in order to pivot, you do need to have courage. We have this term internally, which is yes first culture, right? People would sometimes say to me, "What are you just saying that because you want us to say yes to everything you ask us to do?" And I said, no, that's not what it means. What it means is, when you're presented with a challenge or a target, or something that someone's asked you to build, if you assume from the start that it is possible to do it, then you work backwards from that to figure out how to do it. It's amazing what you can achieve, right? And people who have a yes first mindset, who assume that no matter how big the challenge is, right, that they are able to, that it is possible somehow. It may require a huge amount of resources, it may require lots of different things. If you assume it is possible, the things you will achieve are things that no one else has achieved before. And I think, Elon Musk would be one example of an extreme version of someone with a yes first mindset, right? Like, he assumes stuff is possible. Everyone around him and would say is impossible, right? So we wanted to hire people with a yes first mindset. Those are 3 core parts of the sort of, the culture that we created and that we wanted to hire people who embodied those values. And we tested it in the hiring process. We have it as part of the onboarding process where we can help educate people on that as they joined the company.
What about people who are in the company who don't embody that? Because
they would have normally.
This was come in. Presumably, this came in slightly later into the velocity journey.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, normally we would have found that those people weren't fitting in already, and they probably would have already churned.
Right.
So, what happened when we put this in place is that we found that we had much higher team retention. The team was much happier, much more productive, and they stayed. They stayed with the company, right? But yeah, look, you have to. In some cases we had to let people go over the years, and in all of those situations, I think we, it was as much releasing that person to go and work in a company where they might fit in. I'm not saying our company culture, right, is not the only correct company culture. Every company culture should be different. It should be controversial, right? It should, company culture is not values like honesty and integrity and all of that stuff. Those are hygiene factors. Every company wants to hire honest people. No one wants to hire dishonest people. But, some cultural values should be polarizing, right? And that's how you find the right people to fit in your business. So, the most obvious example is like Facebook's original move fast and break things, right? As a person who's joining Facebook, what you're optimizing for, whether it's getting that feature perfect and testing it 10 times over before you're releasing, or whether it's taking a risk and releasing it slightly early, and getting it out there and iterating once you have user feedback, at which end of the spectrum you're optimizing for. And there are certain people and personalities who will fit that kind of that culture, right? And that's what you want to do as a founder. You want to understand which behaviors are you trying to encourage as a company. They should be quite controversial, and they should be behaviors and values that a lot of people don't agree with. And then great, you put those values on your website or on your careers page. Those people won't apply to come and work with you. Great, you're saving them time, you're saving you time. You're hopefully they're going to go and find somewhere where they do agree with those values or ways of working, right? So it's a super important process that every founder should do. Is really trying to establish what those behaviors are, what are those cultural values that they're looking to, and normally it's stuff that they embody themselves, right? It is always stuff that they embody themselves, or that they should be aiming to embody themselves. And once you do that, you'll find you have people joining you who are applying to join you who are a better fit anyway. You're able to test against that during the hiring process and ask questions around your values and really understand is someone. Is this person going to exhibit those values when they join you, as well as other tests, obviously. And then you'll find that they're happier with you. You work better together, they're more productive, and they're going to stick around and be a part of the journey in the long run, right? But yeah, so that was one of the mistakes we made, was probably not investing enough time early on in doing that. But when we did, it had such a massive, such a positive effect on the rest of the business. So it's definitely something I encourage all founders that I invest in to invest time in doing that as early as possible.
What about mistakes that you personally have made, which nobody really knows about?
A good question.
I'm paid to ask them. I'm not paid.
I mean, look, I think every mistake that you make as a company is down to the founders, right? At the end of the day, right? And again, I'll go back to hiring and your people, because that's the most important part of any business.
Yeah.
Right? If, if a hire didn't work out, right? And in those first few years, I may have said something like, "Oh yeah, they were a terrible hire. They weren't cut out to make it here." Well, whose fault is that? It's my fault. I hired them, or I set up the hiring process and the culture to hire them. That's my fault, right? It's no one else's fault, right? So I think realizing and taking responsibility that pretty much everything that happens in your company is ultimately your fault and your responsibility, and is really important as a founder. And if you don't do that, people find it very hard to respect you. So yeah, I think definitely one mistake was not, and a personal mistake was definitely not investing enough in culture early on, not taking responsibility for when hires didn't work out, and ultimately coming to the realization, actually, if a hire didn't work out, it's really my fault. We set up the hiring process ourselves. We set up the interview process. We're the ones who put the job specs together, or we at least help shape them. So if someone doesn't work out, we got the hiring process wrong, we got the onboarding process wrong, and that's our responsibility. That's one mistake. I'm trying to think of another one. I mean, there are so many. I'm also trying to think of ones I can actually talk about. I would say, as a first-time founder with Velocity Black, raised too much money too quickly.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. We raised a lot of money very quickly. Back in those days, we raised an £8 million Series A. We didn't really have any revenue at that point. And that was, a mistake. And if we had not
How do
done
you
that,
do that?
How?
Yeah. You didn't really have any revenue.
No, but we had an exciting product which everyone could identify with.
And yet you were able to raise an 8 million Series A. Of course, we're talking in the midst of a global recession right now where this would be almost impossible.
Yeah, and this is back in, again, 2014, 15.
Of
right?
course.
So these numbers back then were much bigger,
yes,
right, than they seem today.
Well, which makes it even more extraordinary, though. Yeah.
So, and look, I would say one of our strengths over the years has definitely been fundraising, and me and Zia are both very strong on that front in different ways. And so
what are the different ways? Sorry,
he used to work in banking. He used to work in sales and banking, and his presentation style and everything is amazing.
Really,
I would say I'm stronger on the sort of answering. I'm strong on answering detailed questions and diving deep and dealing with sort of challenges during the fundraising process. I think we made a very good team in fundraising. And again, we had a product which was very easy for people to identify with, right? It doesn't matter if you're a VC, a family office, an angel investor. It's like, yeah,
of course.
I fucking hate waiting for the bill in restaurants.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, that's a real frustration. And it's an easy... It was an easy sell.
Yeah.
And so despite the fact that we didn't necessarily have much revenue, we did have some good traction in the first restaurants that we had live. I think people obviously believed in me and Zia and our ability to build this and grow it into a big company. But yeah, look, if we hadn't done that, we would have had a lot more discipline. And I think we would have found a product with product market fit quicker, where it was sustainable in the long run and we could have created a great business. The fact that we raised all that money kind of let us carry on for longer with an unsustainable business model. So that's definitely one mistake I made, and I wouldn't do that again. I think as a second-time founder now, raised a small amount of money for Sequel, and we'll raise a much bigger round early next year. But I have a lot more confidence, obviously, in my ability to not make some of the same mistakes again in terms of building the team, in terms of the product, and in terms of the strategy. So, I think I would be a lot more comfortable now raising a lot more money without necessarily the tractional progress yet to prove it. But as a first-time founder, there's so many things you don't know, and they're unknown unknowns, right? So you should try as much as possible to stay close to your customers, get some traction with your product, try and get the at least early signs of a sustainable business model before you raise significant capital. Because you can find yourself in a death trap, right? Where you've raised so much at such a valuation, and if you don't, you've basically now got to catch up with that valuation and surpass it by the time you next need to raise money. And if you don't do that, you're dead, right? Or the company will find it very hard to continue operating. And at the very least, the employees' options will be underwater. They'll never make any money from their equity. And probably the investors won't make any return on their investment, right?
That's exactly what's happened with Luna, my company.
Right. Well, let's talk about that.
Oh man, so tough.
For people who
people who won't know, but by the time this is released, they will. Yeah, this morning, at about 8:15, I sent an email to my shareholders, standing down as CEO of Luna, because I felt that I wasn't the right person to lead the company. I think the company can succeed. It just is going through a really difficult patch of not being able to catch up with its valuation, not quite having the traction that investors want to see right now. It doesn't have the commercial traction either, and that's been really difficult. We had 11, well, we still do, as of this morning, but we won't by the time this is released, have 11 amazing people in the business. They have to go, which is so sad. They've put 18 months of unbelievably hard work into building the product, speaking to users, all this kind of thing. And yeah, it's honestly it's my second company this has happened with. So I'm in an eternal graveyard now. But equally, it's making me a better founder each time, although I'm continuing to burn through cash.
Yeah, look, I'm obviously sorry to hear that. We discussed it a bit before we came on, but it sounds like you're making, you're proactively making that tough decision, right? Which is important, right? You always, I think as a founder, making those tough decisions yourself proactively rather than being forced into it, or things getting ahead of you, I think is certainly a better situation to be in. And I guess how are you feeling today? What are your own personal feelings?
I think the truth be told, I feel very burnt out, and I've felt very burnt out. I've given absolutely everything to this, financially been crippled by it. Pretty much got nothing now. But I've felt very burnt out over the last 2 months, to the point where I've come to a complete standstill over the last 2 weeks. And I think the time was right to just actually look after me as well as my fiance and take some of the pressure off her financially and go get a real job, hopefully. Still be involved with the company, but I think personally burnout is really difficult. It's the second time I've gone through it. I probably am a bit like you. I just get my mum said to me this morning when I told her, she said, James, you really just need to reconnect with life again, because you have given up everything and nobody really knows who you are anymore. And I was like, yeah, I like talking to friends, family, like actually being present, that kind of thing, has gone out the window. So actually reconnecting with what my life is, which is I'm a really good person, I think, and I've got really great family, and can go for a beer with friends and not be like, right, I'm getting up at 6 tomorrow, so I'm not having that drink, and I'm not drinking. Sorry. Actually just being a normal 28-year-old human being again. But burnout's awful. I don't know if you will know people who've gone
100%.
And
I felt it. Yeah. I've experienced it as well. So
yeah, that's cool to hear, because I mean, you look at your profile and what you've done, and you don't talk about it ever.
Yeah. And look, I'm here, so I'm talking.
Yeah, you are. Exactly, which is why I respect this conversation so much.
So yeah, look, I definitely have experienced burnout on a few times over the years, and even in my previous career before I really? started my own business. So,
what did it feel like to you?
Just hard to get up out of bed.
Yeah,
and it's like it's almost I would say a lot of the symptoms are the same as depression.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, just very hard to get up and get out of bed. And I found ways to prevent it and to cope with it. And like you, as you said, like having some variation in your life is critical, and you can't, like, even at times where it's very intense, you need to find some time for yourself. And for me, that was always physical exercise. Like, I'm a completely different person if I do not physically exercise. And my dad always used to say to me as a kid, I never really understood it until I experienced burnout the first time. He used to say, yeah, like, it all starts with your, with your physical health. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, if you're physically healthy, you're going to mentally be happy. And it finally clicked when, I got a lot healthier actually from the start of the pandemic. I lost a lot of weight and started doing a lot more exercise. And I realized, Jesus, I'm a much happier person if I keep myself, physically active. And that really helped prevent burnout for me. It gave me, funnily enough, I find that exercise gives you a lot more energy, right, in the rest of your life, right? So that for me was a critical component of preventing it. And then, having some variation in how you work. Like, I'm kind of like a lion as well in terms of how I work, right? I will have like a few days where I go very intense, right? Like 2 or 3 days where I'm doing like 16-hour days. And then I will have 1 or 2 days where I'm doing like 3 hours a day.
Interesting.
Right? And for me, that's important, having that kind of variation and being able to fill those other days, which may be normal work days for people, but actually I'm going to go to the park or whatever, right? So those are the ways I've learned to deal with it. But yeah, look, it can feel crippling at the time. So I feel for you, and I'm kind of happy you've taken the decision.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of happy to be here with you today, given you made the decision today. I'm happy you made the decision, and I feel I'm sure in the coming weeks you'll feel happier and relieved, like a weight's off your shoulders.
Yeah.
Once you get through, obviously, all the tough conversations you've got to have in the coming days. I feel like you will have a new lease of life, and you'll realize that the business isn't everything.
No.
Right? And it can feel like everything at many points in time, but it isn't. And there's so many other things in life which will make you happy. And you realize, and there were many times over the years where Velocity was on the verge of death, right? Many times. And,
really?
Some of those stories that I can't tell now, I will tell another time. But, and you feel like it's the end of the world. And it's, well, actually, looking back at it now, and look, it's easier for me to say, obviously, because the story's gone positively, but it absolutely wouldn't have been the end of the world. It would have been nowhere near the end of the world. And there's lots of other things in my life that make me happy. And, focusing on those can help you, get out of that rut, right? So, yeah, look, thanks for sharing on your own pod, but thanks for sharing. I appreciate it's tough. It's a tough time, but and I appreciate you going ahead with the podcast despite that.
This is my kind of flow state. I love doing this podcast. I really do. I love the fact that founders come on here, investors as well, come on here and actually say things that they would never ever say, because this is kind of a safe space, I hope, for people like us to talk about their shit. And I think and one thing I wanted to come on to talk to you about as well, Alex, is founders, I think, don't talk about their mental health because of fear of the implications that it might have for shareholders, the company, the outside world, etc. And I think that's a massive part of actually kind of founder entrepreneur culture that we need to move past, because otherwise we're not going to have mentally well founders if we can't talk about it, and if they're beholden to shareholder issues. How do you deal with it as an angel investor
in terms of helping founders?
Helping founders and
I always
the struggles.
say, look, as an investor, as an angel investor, firstly, I never take any board seats. I don't want to be on any boards. And even if I did, there's one time I've done it, and I've just been, I'm always on the side of the founder. Doesn't matter what decision you need to make. If I'm going to lose all my money or whatever, I'm going to make sure I'm there for a founder. And I want to be the person that they can come to with the biggest problems, right? There are not many of my shareholders over the years who I've been able to go to with our biggest problems.
Really?
Despite having a lot of shareholders. And be able to trust that they're going to react in a way which isn't going to, make me feel worse and potentially destroy value, right? So I want to be the person they come to with their biggest problems, and however big those problems are and however dark they think they are, I'm pretty sure that I've faced them in the past, or I know people who have, so I can always help. and I try and be helpful and supportive. I think, and in terms of their mental health, I know, I know how that feels. You kind of have to stay outwardly positive, which makes it worse. Right?
Yes.
Like you have to be like, okay, well, I have to be the cheerleader for the team and for the shareholders and everyone, because if I'm not, how are they going to be positive, right? Which adds an extra level of pressure, because even with your friends and family sometimes, like how are you, how's your latest crazy startup doing? It's like, well, I have to say it's going well, right?
Yeah.
And even if you're going through a tough time, whatever, you have to kind of be positive about it, or you feel like you have to be positive about it, right?
Yeah.
So
literally last week, people were like, "Oh, how's the company doing?" I was like, "Yeah, it's going all right, yeah." And I was like,
you've got a visitor.
I was like, "Oh, yeah, it's not going all right though. It's so fucking hard."
Yeah. So look, I would try and I think removing that stigma in founders, at least having some people they can talk to about the reality of the situation, is a critical part of it, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is getting some perspective. I always think when I've been in the toughest situations, and one of the things that's helped me get through it is like having some perspective around how are those challenges really that big? I think about my granddad, who was like a Japanese prisoner of war and escaped like Japanese concentration camps and came out to the UK weighing 6 stone, and I think, well, really, is my life that difficult?
Literally.
Deliveroo and, whatever else helping me on a day-to-day basis, and I'm worried about this, financial issue, right? Really?
I know.
Is that the end of the world? No, it's not.
No.
Like, give yourself some perspective. Think about, a lot of the challenges that people, even in our current day and other parts of the world, have, right, in their day-to-day lives. And I think that helps you get through those situations as well. But yeah, you're right. Having people who you can speak to about what's actually going on and how you actually feel is critical. Whether that's a therapist, whether that's your angel investors, whether it's someone on your board, or even some, I know some amazing VCs who are very founder friendly, and despite being on boards will help their founders through challenging situations. So, but you've got to have those people that you can speak to.
Yeah.
That's a critical part of it.
Thank you so much for coming on.
No worries.
I'm so glad I got out of bed for this.
It sounds like we need to go for a drink. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what your diary's like after this, but yeah. It's amazing to meet you. I've been, as I said, as you walked in off air, like I've been a big fan of yours for a long time.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're fantastic and even better in person. So thank you for coming on and being vulnerable and talking about your shit and how difficult it actually can be for a founder, but equally how you can make a success of it.
Right. Well, look, thank you very much for having me, man. And yeah, look, it sounds like we need to at least go for a coffee, if not a beer.